I need to figure... Whoop, 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 whoop. Ah! Oh no. Okay, we're fine. Everything's fine. Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. It's Tori, and today I'm going to be giving you my February wrap-up. Alright, for you stats nerds on the channel, I've decided to include this little monthly stats update. I read 1,312 finished pages, which basically just means that I finished the books that I was reading. I read 506 unfinished pages, and those are my Augustus and Shogun unfinished books in February. And I also read 344 manga pages for a total of 2,162 total pages and 5 books completed. One thing I do want to add here is that if I have any DNFs during the month, I do not count those in any of my pages read. Star ratings are a little finicky for me, honestly, but I had 1 3-star read, 2 3.5-star reads, 1 4-star, and 1 5-star in the month of February. Let me know if you like me including these monthly stats down in the comments. Despite the fact that the stack that I'm holding up of finished books that I completed in February is smaller than normal, if I add the other 2 books that I was also reading in February, it starts to look a little bit more familiar. Obviously, I did not finish either of my buddy reads in April. I finished Augustus this week. You will be seeing a dedicated review for it shortly, and I am still plugging my way through Shogun. This far through, and I have to get through a little bit more before our discussion that is going to happen on this coming Thursday evening over on Alex from Tall Guy Reads channel, so definitely come and hang out with us for that. It's going to be a great time. But that was a lot of reading, that like 400 pages plus that I didn't get to count for my final books of February because I'm finishing them in March. The first book that I finished in the beginning of February was Spirits of Vengeance by Rob J. Hayes. This is the 3rd book in his Mortal Techniques series, which if you've been watching videos on my channel this last month, you will know that this book solidified the Mortal Techniques as one of my favorite fantasy series of all time. I did a dedicated review for the first 3 books in the series, which you can find up there somewhere, and I basically gush fest about these books. This book I ended up using as my final prompt for the Keymark readathon that happened in January through the beginning of February. And with this book, I got to all of the points that I could to help my team out for the readathon. We came in a very close 2nd place. Good job, guys. This book I'd been kind of saving because I knew that I had loved Never Die in Pawn's Gambit before this so much, and I was ready to kind of savor this one and finish out the series, or what's available so far. And so Spirits of Vengeance follows the story of Haruto, who is a onmyoji, which basically means that he fights vengeful spirits away from towns and cities where they are becoming a problem, and he is immortal. He is joined by a motley cast of characters that are all, again, in Rob J. Hayes fashion, incredibly distinct and interesting and fleshed out. No pun intended sometimes. But the other thing that I really love about these, and I won't say too much about it because I did do an entire Gush Fest video about it, but non-human characters, the vengeful spirits and the different types of spirits, the different types of wuxia martial arts inspired fantasy, coupled with the kind of shonen anime magic techniques idea, is just such an incredible blend in this series. And again, I've said it before, but Rob Hayes really knocked it out of the park with this series, and I'm so thrilled that I was able to fit this one in February, because I wasn't entirely sure that I was going to be able to read it then, but the readathon gave me the right kick in the pants to get to this one, and I'm so glad that I did. The next read that I had was a ebook, and that was Ogres by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This book was recommended to me by Alan from the Library of Alexandria, and there are quite a few other people that had mentioned really loving it. So I picked it up because I needed something kind of short as a refresher after shoving through a 500+ page book at the end of the readathon. And I knew going into this story that it definitely takes its twists and turns, and because of that, it's very difficult to synopsize without spoiling it. This novella is told in second person, which I actually didn't find incredibly off-putting in this particular case. I think second person perspective is a very, very difficult perspective to get right, and Adrian Tchaikovsky did it beautifully. I think once I kind of got used to it in the first few pages, it didn't bother me through the entire rest of the story. This novella packs so many incredibly heavy themes into a very short amount of space. It kind of blew my mind. It is a very fast read because it's very difficult to put down. What I can say about the synopsis is that you, or the character, reader, narrator, are a person who is in a small kind of outskirts village that is under the oppression of ogre overlords. So it's a heavy read, but it is a very quick one. So I gave that one a 4-star and really enjoyed my first Adrian Tchaikovsky experience. I definitely intend to continue with some of his other books and novellas. I have been told that Elder Race is also a very good one. That one's been on my radar for a little bit. That one's kind of more in the sci-fi genre. It was definitely a good first experience with the author. So yeah, thanks to Alan and the rest of the crew for recommending that I read it. After Ogres, I was really kind of hitting a little bit of a reading slump in the middle of February, and I think it was partially because I just hustled so much for the readathon and was reading Shogun and reading Augustus, and those are both very, you know, broad, epic, historical, lots of dates and names and lots of big things happening and very epic in scope. And I needed something, and I didn't know what that was. So my lovely husband went to the library with the kids and brought me back the first volume, I'm holding it upside down, the first volume of the Alice in Borderland manga. Now, I watched this show last year. It's on Netflix. It's a Japanese drama. And then I watched the second season when it came out towards the end of 2022 and really enjoyed it. It definitely has a similar vibe to the show Squid Game, if you're familiar with that. But essentially it's a young man who is tossed into this decaying post-apocalyptic world where he is forced to play games in order to prolong his life. And that's pretty much all I'm going to say about it. It is incredibly fast-paced, incredibly violent, incredibly just intense. It's so intense. And I really liked the show. I have so many mixed opinions on this. It's the artwork in this is absolutely stunning. I loved it. I think that the style of the manga is really beautiful. The character work is mostly great. My issue comes in, and this is something that I recognize is partially just a manga style. That being said, it really stood out to me in this. And that is that when you have the female characters introduced, or even side female characters, the focus of their character is definitely very physical, because usually when you get a lot more of a variety of expression and angle and things with the male characters that are introduced, and the female characters, it was basically like a giant chest shot every time that they are introduced, and that's kind of like the main visual focus of their characters. That really kind of got old after a while, and it really took me away from the story, which made me really sad because I really love this story and I think it's brilliant. And especially having watched the entire 2 seasons available on Netflix and knowing how, like, what is happening and what the story is about and all of the reveals that happen later toward the second season, it made me sad because the female characters in the show I actually like so much better, so much better than I like them in the manga. So I am continuing with the next mangas in this series. I have finished the second volume and I'm moving on to the third probably, so you'll get my thoughts on both of those in March, the March wrap up. But yeah, beautiful artwork. I love this story. I think it's really cool. I just think that this is a manga specifically where the female characters, I think, are objectified a little too much for my taste. So my personal opinion is if you want to experience the full extent of this story, I would recommend watching the show on Netflix. Because it's very good, and I really think that the acting in it, there were some parts of this that were incredibly intense in the show that I found less so in the manga, and in fairness, that may just be because I knew what was coming. So I do want to give it that caveat that, you know, it is probably going to be less of an impact when it doesn't shock you as much, because you know that it's there. I hate star ratings because they're so confusing, but I'm really waffling on what I actually want to rate this. And I haven't written my full review on it yet, but that's my overall thoughts, just kind of rambly. Thanks for listening. Next up, I went a completely different direction, and I picked up The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. This is a classic that's been on my bucket list for quite a while, and as some of you might know, I have kind of created a little classics book club with my friends Patricia Meredith over at P. Meredith Author on the YouTube channel, and then I have She Was Only Evie on her booktube channel, and Kay from Kay's Hidden Shelf and her booktube channel, which will all be linked down below, so you can go check those ladies out. And we decided to buddy read this and then have a discussion about it on Patricia's channel, which you can view. I will also try to remember to put the link for that down below as well, so you can go watch that. We had a great discussion on this book. This was my 3-star read for March. I think I wasn't super impressed. And there's so much we talked about in the discussion that I think really gets to the heart of why this book was underwhelming for me. It definitely didn't have the impact, or shock value isn't really the right term, but essentially that I was expecting for it. And I think there were a lot of plot holes that kind of made me raise an eyebrow, and it's just a very interesting book, and I think a lot of people have misinterpreted what the book is trying to do. There's a lot of people that hold this up as a representation of split personality, as it was known back when Stevenson wrote it, which it isn't. And yeah, I would highly encourage anybody who has read this and is interested or wants to know more to go check out our discussion on this book, because we talked about a lot of different topics within the story and the time that it was written and all of those things. And we did discuss, one of the things I did want to bring up with this is we did discuss that, you know, we have access in the modern day to so many things visually in reading that are so much more dark and horrific, I think, than a lot of what was being written at the time that this book came out. And so what might have been really horrific and shocking for a reader in these days is something that probably doesn't catch us as much. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad to have knocked it off of my bucket list for classics. I can say that I've read it now. I have this cool copy of it. I don't know if I'm gonna keep it or not. But it is very pretty. It was a 3-star. I read it. It was fine. There were some things that I really was irritated by in this book and wanted more from, but overall we had a great discussion about it, so I'm really glad that I read it for that. And then last, rounding out the February reading experience, I finished The Last Ranger by JDL Rosell, or Rossell. I'm not entirely sure which of those is the correct pronunciation, so please let me know in the comments if you know. And this one I put under the 4-star category on Goodreads, but I rated it a 3.5 star. This book is a self-pub fantasy that is based upon, as I understand it, the Horizon Zero Dawn video games, which is something that I was actually playing earlier this year and really enjoying. And I completely see the inspiration coming through in this book, and I love that Josiah, the author, went that direction, because I think it's a really cool, like, bounce point for a story like this. This book has a very cool elemental magic system. It's almost vampiric in a way, has very strong consequences where in order to feed yourself or your own magic that you have to draw from the things around you. But the main character of this story is Lane, and she is a ranger at kind of the outskirts of this frontier, and she lives in the lodge with a bunch of other rangers. They kind of just guard this area of the country. Lane is joined by several other characters in the beginning. There's a mentor character, she has a best friend named Isla, And there's a massive tragedy that strikes during the first section of this book that kind of sets the trajectory for the rest of the story. Again, that magic system I really, really liked. I loved the idea of kind of that vampiric elemental sort of magic. It's like blood magic without actually being blood magic, which was a really cool take. The world building is really beautiful in this. Where I kind of struggled a little bit was more in the main character. I wasn't a huge fan of Lane, and when she was the only POV for the whole story, that was something that I really struggled with because she was a character that I just really didn't jive with. The biggest struggle for me with Lane as a character was I feel like there were so many decisions that were made that felt more plot-driven than character-driven, where she would make decisions that felt like they were trying to drive the plot instead of really being a explainable character motive, which is something that I'm such a character-driven reader that when a character kind of gives way a little bit to the plot, that really is hard for me to engage with and stay immersed with. But overall, I definitely had a good time with this. This was a very not short, but fast-paced read. It reads very quickly, and Josiah puts in a lot of really beautiful descriptions of the nature and world in the story. So if you like very nature-based world building and cool elemental kind of blood magic without being blood magic. I don't really know if there's anything else I can add to that. I do have, I believe, yes, my full review of this on Goodreads, so you can definitely go check that out as well. And I want to say a big thank you, first of all, to Josiah for very graciously sending me a review copy of this book. And I was happy to finally be able to get to it, and I have been very humbled by how many authors have been very gracious with their review copies in sending me to read. So thank you for that. So yeah, that is my February wrap up. I hope that you guys had a great month in February. Please let me know down in the comments what your favorite read of February was, what books you read in February, what you liked and didn't like. I always love seeing what you guys have been up to and what you sank your teeth into in February. In March, I anticipate having a lot more books on the finished list, because I will be finishing Augustus, which I already have done, and also finishing Shogun, theoretically. That one might drag into April just a little bit, but I'm hoping not. Yeah, as far as my writing process goes, I actually had a pretty decent month in February. I feel like I've really kind of gotten past that writing slump hurdle from November to January, and I'm really starting to make some serious progress in the first draft of my epic fantasy novel. I launched over 60,000 words in February, which felt amazing, and I'm continuing to climb, so I'm very excited. I'm going to be hitting 70,000 words here shortly. So we're making some good progress. We're trucking along. Yeah, and that's pretty much all of the updates that I have for you guys. So I hope, again, that you guys are having fantastic reads this month. I hope you're having a great week, and I will see you in the next video.